Save a second hit of the W, bonk that guy.
Yeah, so it's pretty understandable to not want to compare him directly one-to-one, but you want to see a lot of what Acadian was doing, which was getting people ahead. There was a game that they lost where he was able to get Dokla up to 4-1 on Aurelia. And while they ended up losing that game, you want to see that level of impact where you know how to find advantages for your team, play to your win conditions, get good ganks off, and set your team up for success. So that way you can at least show people that you can play within systems and things like that.
All right, well, let's see exactly how they decide to do this one in Champion Select. Getting into the bans, it's Gangplank and Trist banned out by TSM, Zoe and Tom Kench banned out by OpTic. The Kench is benched. We aren't going to see any more Devours, no big saves, no, don't worry, Corky, you can go in, I'll eat you. Nothing like that.
I mean, I always feel like it's just like one person complaining because they like doing this annoying thing, and then this other annoying person's blocking them. Like, is Malzahar really like, yeah, I want to see more of that?
No, okay, so to be fair, we don't want to see more of Malzahar, but yeah, at the same time, Tom Kent shuts down a lot of other fun stuff.
That's true, that's true. It's not just Malzahar.
Right. Nobody has fun when they're having to go up against the Kench like that, but Morgana, your third ban on the side of TSM Academy.
Very interesting ban, just because we saw Lemon use it to great effect both in Academy and the LCS. Lemon's not here anymore.
Nope.
So I'm really not sure why you're banning that in the first rotation of bans. Maybe they had nothing else they wanted to do, and I'm not sure if Winter is a renowned Morgana player, so I don't want to say it's a waste of a ban, but it is surprising.
All right, the final ban coming out in the first phase from OpTic Academy will be Vladimir. Bit more normal on that one. I mean, granted, he's one of the, he's the first tier 2 mid laner right now, with the tier 1s being Ryze, Azir, and Malzahar. So, have to see how that works out for them as TSM Academy goes ahead and locks in their AD carry immediately for Mr. Rawls.
Yeah, Kog'Maw is one of the ones that people think of as the premier hyper carry. It does, spike really early on with just needing a Ginsu's really to become a damage threat, and then you get your Hurricanes and suddenly you're a team fight monster just on 2 items. So a very scary champion with how hard it scales and how early that scaling starts. So no surprise to see them grab it, but a lot of champions left available not going for the Azir, actually choosing Malzahar over.
Hey, it's your favorite champion.
I love it.
Yep. Lots of fun with the R.
I can't wait to see that flash R.
Well, hey, if they end up ganking him a lot, blowing his flash a lot like what you saw happen to Sun in the first game, maybe you're never going to get to see the flash R. Yeah,
they did a really good job attacking the Malzahar and making him feel like he's on the back foot. Tom Kench was a very critical tool in doing that, being able to teleport 2 people on top of Malzahar, who was pretty immobile, made it so that he had to flash out of those situations, and then he was prone to repeat ganks, or at least kind of cut off his ability to play aggressive.
So along with the Malzahar, OpTic Academy going to be locking in Jarvan second, and you always like to see some good initiation power like that up against an immobile carry like Kog'Maw.
Absolutely. They're going to be able to go in there, find him on backlines, and it's also going to be very difficult for the enemy mid laner. We'll have to see what they end up taking here. We've seen things like Zilean pop up in the LCS, and it was very effective one time. Not so effective when he tried it himself, but it is showing that people are starting to account for Malzahar beyond just let's pick Tom Kench into it. There's other options that you can go for. We'll have to see what they do, not choosing to give away what their mid plan is quite yet.
Well, the prophecy's coming true. At the beginning of the day today, we talked about how Jarvan and Sejuani are so prevalent in Academy. Game number 2, Jarvan versus Sejuani. They are pretty prevalent after all. Braum also going to be locked in for the TSM squad.
Yeah, another very powerful champion down there in the bot lane. Is able to engage, defend people, just basically does it all while having a strong laning phase. So no surprise to see that one grabbed away. And Ezreal was another pick, as you see locked in here, that had gotten through that first round of the ban phase. So no surprise to see OpTic Academy grab that. Looked pretty good there in the hands of Eclipse last game, but his team was kind of on the back foot after minute 20, so it was hard to really shine, as that's about when Ezreal really starts power spiking hard.
Right. They had already fallen behind and kind of fallen into that trap of that big fight where they got aced at 20 minutes, so couldn't really show it off too much that game. Let's see how we handle the second part of the bans, though. Moving into that, Gnar is the first ban from OpTic Academy. This team still has to pick both its support and its top laner, so they're trying to open up a little room up there for Dokla.
Yeah, with getting rid of Gnar, you're getting rid of a potential lane bully in a couple matchups, so maybe they're trying to pick Ornn or something like that. We've seen that champion fall down some people's priority lists a little bit here, but I still think it's personally a very good tank champion up there on the top lane, so we'll have to see what they choose to go with. Dokla does not want to give up the Gnar and playing Aurelia into it again.
No. Probably not after what happened in week 1.
Yeah.
That's, we'll just go ahead and chalk that one up as a truth. Tarek banned out by TSM Academy, doesn't want that big team fight potential in there, while Ryze is the ban from OpTic. They know that their opponents still have to pick both solo laners. They don't want one of those to be everybody's favorite rune mage.
A little surprising to see Azir just going through. This is a champion that Ablaze Olive is very comfortable on, so maybe they're saying, yeah, we want you to play Azir, and we're going to gank it a lot with Malzahar and J4, but at the same time, it's a dangerous game because if that doesn't go right, you can see, well, Blaze Olive is very comfortable on this champion. Could take over the game if you don't punish it properly.
I mean, you can try to gank something all day long, and if the ganks don't land exactly how you need them to, Azir is still Azir.
Yeah.
I mean, you put 3 items on that guy, and it's not going to matter. Camille, though, will be the final ban of this champion select. TSM Academy wanting to open up a little space in top lane of their own.
Yep, and there's that Ornn pick that we were saying potentially they were looking for, banning that Gnar out. It's not a complete lane dominant matchup, but it is very annoying with Gnar usually able to chunk out the Ornn. Ornn is one of those champions who always feels like he has a way to win matchups. Just gets very, very annoying if you ever get popped up off the pillar and the E combo is stunning you, knocking you up in the air. So Gnar can lose if that happens, but as long as you don't get knocked up, generally Gnar will be favorable there.
I mean, Ornn's strength comes from matching up against melee champions, right? Because his trading pattern is just so difficult to deal with, knocking you away with the auto attack after shielding and doing percent HP damage with the W. So Gnar kind of doesn't have to subscribe to that as much, but you ban him out, you don't have to worry about it. Instead, you're going up against the Cho'Gath, the big hungry monster versus the big forge, whatever thing Ornn is, with Corki in the mid lane. You predicted seeing more Corki, and dang it, Mark, we're going to see some more Corki.
Oh, I don't want to be that right.
Well, you're right 2 out of 2 so far. That's 100% right weight.
Oh, right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Corki is a champion that's just so safe in so many different ways. It has a lot of flexibility in its summoner spell choices, so you can take whatever you think you're going to need to be able to survive. The fleet footwork does allow you to stay relatively healthy. And then a Trundle coming in last, flexing the Ornn down to the bot lane.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I like it.
Trundle in the top lane. You can sap the stats from the Sejuani in the team fights before the Frost armor gets popped and get 12 bajillion armor and MR. Not quite that much, but very rough estimate based on the level 16 Sejuani passive.
Yeah, that'd
be very tanky.
You can get that, or just wait for, you know, Cho'Gath to pop his Stone Plate, ult him, drop a ton of his health as well. So a lot of nice targets here for Dokla on that Trundle. And he does like playing a lot of aggressive stuff. We've seen the Aurelia and things like that. Trundle much more in that vein than Ornn was going to be.
Well, it will be fun to see exactly how these two square up in the top lane. Trundle's one of those champions you don't get to see an awful lot of these days, so watching them break that out should kind of subscribe to what we were talking about earlier with Academy League. They're playing unique champions. They're doing stuff that might not be in the average wheelhouse. And now, let's see what it does up against this honestly pretty strong front line on the side of TSM Academy. You've got 2 big backline cannons, and everybody else's job is to just be that meatball in front.
And especially with Trundle, it's a champion that people are always experimenting with. It always feels like he's just working his way into the meta. Rarely does he become like the dominant force, but he's a great plan B in a lot of these kind of matchups where now you can flex him all over the place. He's good down bot lane into tanks. You could see him end up down there sometimes. And in the top side, it becomes a very annoying split push threat while still being a very big frontliner in team fights. So it's a champion that if it goes well here, maybe people start paying more attention to it in the actual LCS.
And I want to go ahead and set the stage a little bit for exactly, you know, where the TSM Academy team is mentally going into this game. Because remember, you're now looking at the only remaining winless team in the Academy League. And at the same time, this is a team where, for those of you who saw the Academy intro in week number 1, the TSM players are saying, look, we're part of TSM. We're part of this organization that always wins. These are the dudes who always come out on top in North America, and that's what we intend to do as well. And now they're sitting at the bottom. So the pressure is on. Yeah,
the pressure's on, and in this game in particular, they don't have a ton of playmaking in the early game. I mean, you have a relatively passive mid lane, a relatively passive top lane, a relatively passive bot lane, with a relatively passive jungler. I mean, Sejuani can make plenty happen, has great skirmishing, but compared to the Jarvan 4, is obviously more on the back foot. So this is another game where I feel like you want to come out, you want to make a big, strong message right away saying we're not going to get bullied around, but you end up just off the draft in much more of these kind of make it to late game situations.
Well, we saw CLG do it. We'll have to see if TSM can do it because they do have the scaling. We talked about the Cogmaw. You mentioned the 2-item power spike, and we know it only gets crazier from that point on. So it's going to be up to Mr. Rawls, like we said, to be that carry this team needs, be the guy that can all rally around. And for a Blaze Olive, too, on the Corki, we saw just how effective that is last game. Once it can get to 6 items, the power, the poke, and the burst, and everything together, I was also impressed with what we saw so far today from the Corki on the package delivery, making use out of those. We'll have to see how that goes so far this game, as Grig does find a fight with Kadir here early on at level 3. Forces him away so he can take the Scuttlecrab for himself, but Dokla making the rotation down here, trying to stop that, but Grig's fast enough on the trigger to walk away with the Crab regardless.
Some pretty aggressive trading in the mid lane. Palafox down to around 30 HP, same with the Blaze Olive. And I know I saw him running with the overheal rune. So a Blaze Olive doesn't mind trading relatively aggressively. He does have the lifesteal from the Doran's Blade, and with the Fleet Footwork actually heals up very, very quickly. You see back above half HP, so Corki really does not mind aggressive trading in that sense because he'll be able to heal up after.
Taking a look at the bottom lane, you can kind of just see things going along pretty passively for these guys. A slight CS lead for Andy's Ezreal over Mr. Rollas on the Kog'Maw right now, but again, it's only a couple of creeps. Normally that's going to be equaled out by the time the wave collides to the turret anyway, as topside Brandini will just keep farming up on this Cho'Gath. And these two champions, their passives are both get health when a minion dies. So it makes it very hard for them to force each other out of lane.
Yeah, there is a very sustained, focused matchup. Trundle, as the game goes on, and especially kind of towards the mid game, does have a pretty nice trading advantage and can push in the Cho'Gath most of the time, but it's not guaranteed.
You also got to be careful for that Trundle right now, because you're up against Summoner Spellbook Cho'Gath, so he has the Ignite early on to kind of just dissuade Trundle from ever wanting to do any kind of a 1 versus 1. Since there is so much healing capability on both sides, you can just pop the Ignite, say nope, get him out of there, make sure that he doesn't want to take that option anytime soon, and just get yourself more towards that mid game. You mentioned Stoneplate Cho'Gath and what this champion evolves into as the game goes on, and even though this team does have those two big cannons and a Blaze Olive and Mr. Rollas, the Cho'Gath's still a real damage threat in his own. Shady sidestepping the charge from Winter to join up with Mr. Rollas, mounting a counterattack there against Andy as the bot lane gets a little bit skirmishy back and forth. Mr. Rollas looking for that gank. Not Mr. Rollas, excuse me, Kadir looking for that gank here in the mid lane. A Blaze Olive going to be hit by the combo. Very nice knock-up from Kadir. They won't go over the wall to chase him. Grig is right there, but blowing that summoner spell, forcing a Blaze Olive back. Very well played.
Yeah, well played. And oh, hold on.
Still going after him. Does land the slow. Grig is here. Oh, that's so close.
I don't think his electrocute was back up quite yet, or maybe even his passive, so did not quite have as much damage as he needed. I believe he only got 2 autos in anyway, so maybe that's why you didn't see the electrocute. But either way, misjudges his damage, loses his flash for it, and that's really unfortunate because he was in a position where you can just wait, farm up till 6, you'll have your flash advantage against a flashless Corki, and you can basically 100% kill him with a Malzahar with flash ultimate as well. Still going to potentially be an option, but they did lose a fair amount of that opportunity.
All right, 2 versus 1 topside. Flash away from Dokla, but it might not be enough. The stun comes through from Grig. Your Ignite comes down from the Cho'Gath. The flash into the smack. First blood.
And there's that Ignite you were talking about, being able to throw in that little extra bit of damage. Not too bad. And so very quickly, TSM answers back. Aggression down the bot lane too, though. They want to get involved.
Yeah, bottom side, Shady takes a couple of blows. However, with Winter and Andy both pretty much completely out of mana, they got to head back to the base. They're not going to find anything more off of that trade that'll then give Shady the opportunity to get himself back afterwards. But I like seeing these guys not being afraid to play aggressively. You mentioned that you can pick the Ornn into those melee matchups. He does well into them. Ornn naturally succeeds versus melee champions. But here's a replay of what happened top.
Yeah, maybe they should have left the Ornn topside because so far Trundle goes down early on. Nice flash followed by Grig, landing that W slow, making sure that they can get in range. Brandini landed the Ignite, but they didn't want to potentially risk losing the kill, so commits the flash as well. And off that, he's able to complete the mini Thornmail, whose name I can remember.
Bramblevest.
Bramblevest, there we go.
Yeah, Bramblevest.
So pretty important versus Trundle because most of his damage, pretty much all of his damage comes through auto attack trading. You can apply that passive cutting into his health regen, which can slightly skew the matchup in your favor. Of course, with the Tiamat, Trundle then often just ignores you and pushes the lane in over and over, but at the very least, you keep yourself safe from dying most often.
All right. A move coming in onto the enemy red buff from the OpTic side, though, wanting to try to secure this one. They do have the flash ult from the Malzahar. Can they find that on anybody? I don't think so. They'll walk away. They do get the red.
Nice contest overall. Kadir happy with that one.
Kadir almost level 6 as well, getting very, very close on that one, so Once he has that, like you said, will we see it mid lane? Will we see it bottom lane? The Cataclysm just adds so much power to the Jarvan. You want to see him use it as soon as possible.
Yeah, even in the top side at this point, with how many flashes were blown on the top and mid lane, you know, he has a lot of options to go for here. Mid lane is, generally speaking, a much easier gank, so wouldn't be surprised to see him down there.
And even though Brandini had that Bramble Vest you talked about, you're still seeing Dokla just move up and bonk him over and over again. The Bramble Vest, remember that the base damage of 25 was drastically reduced to a % armor value a couple of patches ago to make up for just how effective it was against champions like Trundle. So life's a bit easier than it used to be, at least, but maybe not for Shady, who's finding himself stunned up and bullied around a little bit. Winter also going to be soaking a lot of damage there as Shady's Ignite will wither him low, but he still walks away.
Super aggressive trading down the bot side, but a small advantage for OpTic getting that summoner spell out here. So they got to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, you can always, whenever you can trade just your normal spells off for an enemy summoner, you'll call that a win. I mean, even if you're walking around with not that much HP afterwards, you still got the rejuvenation bead, you've still just got your natural regeneration. He'll be all right. He'll potions too.
Yeah, he'll be fine, and especially with Kleptomancy Ezreal getting more of those consumables to pop. He's always pretty happy with that kind of stuff.
All right, let's go ahead and check in on where the farm is now that we're almost 9 minutes into the game here. You've got a definite advantage for the Trundle in the top side, 20 up over the Cho'Gath. Mid lane, 13 positive for the Corki over that Malzahar. And bottom side, Ezreal still with a small lead of his own, but honestly, the least impactful of those 3 lanes as Kadir moves towards the top side, helping Dokla put some damage into this turret. And honestly, OpTic Academy may be able to secure themselves first turret on this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of bot side vision for OpTic, so they probably knew Sejuani wasn't up there. Rotated 3-man dive to threaten Brandini, who does have good wards, saw it coming, but backed off the turret and lost about 75% of his turret's HP for that small map movement out of OpTic. And this really accelerates the pace at which you might see the Trundle able to take this turret. He's about 1 demolish away with a couple of auto attacks of being able to take that down for first turret.
Yep, demolish with that 40-second cooldown timer means he's going to have to wait for a couple more waves, but once he's got it back up again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kadir or maybe even Palafox make some sort of a roam up there to secure that and get that bonus gold for themselves as Palafox keeps farming up here mid lane. You can see yet another early QSS coming from the Corki in the Corki-Malzahar matchup. Really, really cautious to avoid those ult situations.
Absolutely. We talked about how he had his flash down for a little while. He was very scared. That's back up, so he's a little safer, and now it makes it so Malzahar really is not an option to start it off with. But you still have to be careful with the Corki, so you don't get knocked up out of your Valkyrie, which we saw happen in the first gank attempt. So Kadir still has a fair amount of outplay opportunity.
Jarvan actually is one of the champions that I think disregards QSS very well as Winter takes a decent chunk of damage down here in the bottom lane, charges himself away from it. But, I mean, Jarvan's got a knock-up, and he puts you in a crater. And neither of those things can be QSS. So, very effective champion to have on your team when you also have the champion that forces your opponent to buy a QSS. It's the Malzahar tax.
Yeah, and it's all physical damage, so even better.
Yep. You can't do anything about it with MR if it doesn't even apply to your magic resist. Dokla continues to push here in the top side, and this TSM Academy, remember we talked about these guys being veterans, but veterans that didn't have the most impressive showings when they were in the LCS. And now that they're in Academy, if they want to prove themselves, it's the same thing we were talking about Moon, right? If you want to prove that you should be back in the LCS, you should be really turning things on here in Academy. 1 versus 1 mid lane, not going to turn into a whole lot else. The minion wave dies first on the red side, though, so the blue minion's going to have to be addressed by Palafox. More damage coming out from Mr. Rawless here in the bottom side. Glacial Fissure knocking Winter up into the air. Unstoppable coming through. One more auto attack still going to do it. Shady will pick up that kill.
And there you see on the side. Oh, coming down.
All right, there's your Cataclysm. No way out for Shady on that one. Gonna trap him up in that crater, take him down. Meanwhile, Dokla falls on the top side, and TSM Academy 3-1 across the map.
Not done yet, though. Palafox made his way down.
Mr. Rawless gonna be the target on this when your ulti comes down from Malz. They pop in pretty easy, give the money over to Andy. Kog'Maw runs after Kadir. Can't quite finish that one off, butterfly wings or not. Oh! Meanwhile,
he aggroed the jungle camp.
Kadir attacked the Krug.
Can't say that was a good decision.
Yeah, I don't think I support that one, Mark. I don't think I support that one. Hopefully, we'll get to see a little bit of a look at it in the replay. Maybe he threw the flag over the wall, and in his attempt to spear the flag, he poked the Krug, and as a parting gift, the Krug kicked him in the butt.
Potentially.
Potentially. We can only surmise until we see for sure.
Yeah, we'll get another look at that. We'll start a fight off with Winter going down. He doesn't really respect the amount of threat he's in, doesn't get the unstoppable off until it's too late. There's really no much CC coming in. Tries to drop his ult too late as well. So he was just a step behind the play every single part of the process. And then on the top side, good counter by TSM as well, getting aggressive, making sure Trundle's held down. And then a very intelligent TP here by AblazeOlive to make sure that they win this race up in the top side. He knows that his tanks will be able to finish this turret off, and he goes down to defend the bot side turret, so they're actually able to grab that first turret gold.
And we didn't get to see the very end of the replay.
No, I feel like that was the most important part.
Yup, we'll never know the fate of Kadir and the Deadly Krugs. It's like a Harry Potter book.
Yeah.
Kadir and the Deathly Krugs. But those Krugs did end up putting the one death on him, so that's a bit unfortunate for the side of OpTic Academy. TSM currently up a little over 1,000 gold. Brandini content just continuing to farm up here, still maintaining that CS deficit compared to his opponent, but honestly not dropping down any further. Pops the Ignite onto the Trundle once again. The healing, such a big part of this matchup. That Ignite does so much work in what would otherwise be a very Trundle-favored 1 versus 1. Brandini keeping himself alive for now, but the TP in from Palafox should be able to buy enough time here. The silence comes in, but it's not timed correctly, and Brandini will make his escape.
Barely able to get out of there. The Ezreal also coming in a second too early. It does buy enough time for Dokla to be able to take this turret down, but you see how difficult it is already for this Trundle to win that 1v1. He was going to lose it without the teleport coming in from Palafox, and even with that, they don't get the kill. So a lot of ground to make up for Dokla here, so he's actually able to start winning this 1v1 convincingly. And in the meantime, the rest of TSM is doing great on the other portions of the map as well.
And as Brandini got back, you can see him pick up the Frozen Heart. His team also just grabbed themselves the first Drake of the game, so that Cloud Drake to give him a little bit of extra rotation power. I like the Frozen Heart. It's so good against the Trundle. It also does a little bit in shutting down the damage potential of both the Jarvan and the Ezreal. Plus cooldowns on Cho'Gath means you can just throw out that many more Ruptures, that many more Silences every time.
Yeah, absolutely a great item to pick up for him. And Cho'Gath is a champion who's very flexible in the itemization early on. You sometimes see Abyssal Mask. You can see, like you said, this Frozen Heart. Sometimes you see even Adaptive Helms right away, depending on what they're going up against. They have a lot of freedom in that build as a tank to do whatever they feel like they need. Righteous Glories often come in as well to get some extra engage power, because that's the one thing you can say Cho'Gath is lacking, is being able to pull the trigger on when they want to go.
Right, kind of makes it hard for him to go in and be that big initiator. But then again, that's what Grig is for on this Sejuani, currently sitting on 0-0 and 2. Cinder Hulk completed across the board. His opponent has the same itemization setup. Although you do have a stopwatch on the Jarvan, which does give him a little bit more leeway in saying, okay, I'm going to go in what would otherwise be a suicide, but I can pop stopwatch and keep myself alive.
Jarvan can be a little suicidal at points. You get that 2,500 range engage between Flash, EQ, ult. Sometimes you need to be an oops, I went too far button.
Or I just went too far into the Krugs. Either way, sometimes it happens, but for the next Drake, excuse me, it is Infernal, and I expect to see a fight over that one. I always get excited, Mark, whenever I see this red Drake picture in the top left part of the screen, because that means the teams are going to have something that they will kill each other over, which is exactly what I want to see as we're in this mid-game zone. As we're 16 minutes into the game now, one turret taken down on each side, they're kind of just jockeying for control, shuffling their players around, trying to find the right lane setups to have those small macro advantages. And eventually, something's got to collide.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the case where AblazeOlive kind of getting roamed on a little bit here with Winter coming in. Both teams have a fair amount of poke on their side and pretty beefy front line, so a lot of that Infernal jockeying for position will have to do with how much poke lands. Kind of similar situation here, breaking up near the Rift Herald.
All right, speaking of Rift Herald, game number 1, disappointment. Game number 2, I want to see if they can wield it properly. I want to see if we get the opportunity to see it take down a turret and get used to its intended purpose.
Oh,
we'll see.
You'll have to get the Rift Herald first. Both teams backed off that attempt. Everyone was collapsing. And that's what we're saying. It's very difficult for these teams to kind of brute force objectives down from an even game state because, hey, an Ezreal's shooting me, a Corki's shooting me, and you quickly get chunked out, even as a beefy frontliner.
Sometimes in a game of chicken, both the cars have to swerve away, and nobody gets to say that
Nothing
they walk away with the prize. Yep, it's just two guys actually just happen to both turn off onto a different road. Pushing up, a Blaze Olive here in the mid lane with the 191 to 153 CS lead over his opponent. Significant farm advantage. Still working on getting that Trinity Force though. Not quite there because it was delayed from the QSS. Once he hits that, that'll be a nice power spike. Already having the Ginsu's Rageblade power spike down there on the Kog'Maw for TSM Academy. If these guys get themselves into a 5v5 and that front line manages to protect those two, oh, they're going to do some damage.
Absolutely. And with the Infernal Drake not coming up for a couple more minutes, you would expect a Blaze Olive to be able to finish that Triforce, and then they'll be 100% ready for that team fight early on. Cho'Gath already, like you said, completing a couple major items. Pretty heavily indexed into armor right now, no MR, so maybe that percent health damage that comes in from Malzahar will be able to chew through him a little bit, but otherwise, TSM's looking pretty good right now with a 1,000 gold lead. We talked about how their comp was definitely more focused on surviving some of these early game pressures.
Right, and if you look across the board, looking at OpTic, I specifically want to just sort of check in on Kadir and Winter, because these are the two guys that, remember, we said they're the members of the real roster that weren't here in week number 1. This is where you had Acadian and you had Lemon Nation filling in for them and taking that spot. But now that they're here, how are they shaping up? And you've got 0, 1, and 2 on Kadir compared to his opponent who's 0, 0, and 2. Pretty much same farm, so very, very similar performances. And Kadir would be deathless as well if not for that slight mistake towards the end of the skirmish in bottom lane. So Kadir performing pretty much on par with his opponent.
Yeah, I think Kadir has had a relatively good game. He's been in the right place at the right time. Went too aggressive in the mid lane and lost his flash, hurting his playmaking ability because he wanted that kill. And then once again, the bot lane, able to follow up on the dive very well, but once he gets out, makes a mistake, like you said. So right place, right time, a couple small decision-making errors to punish him, stop him from really being able to go off this game.
And for a lot of these players, a lot of these guys that don't have as much experience as some of the other guys that you're seeing in Academy, as some of the guys that have played on the LCS stage before, so much of this is learning. So much of this is going back and looking at the VODs afterwards and talking with the coach and talking with your teammates and saying, here's what went good, but here's what could have gone better. And that's the main differences you're looking to see at these teams as you go week to week is, hey, did they fix that thing? Is he still doing that thing? Are they still overstaying? Are they still going too hard? What's happening with that? And right now, TSM Academy pushing up in the bottom lane, looking to build this early lead even further. Almost up to 2,000 gold, closer to 1.5 if I'm being totally honest about it. But Baron spawning in 10 seconds, Infernal Drake spawning in 25. The fights are coming, Mark.
Oh yeah, we're going to be getting them any minute now. And a lot of power spikes being hit. Andy has completed his Iceborne Gauntlets as well as having his Muramana. So he will be hitting fairly hard. A lot of AD, or excuse me, armor though, on Brandini. So could have a hard time getting to the front line.
All right, Winter and Andy having to jump back as Mr. Rawlez and Shady once again threatening to just go toe-to-toe with them. And honestly, they don't seem to want anything to do with it. Mr. Rawlez very scary on that Kog'Maw. Working now. Couple of long swords in the inventory to go along with that Ginsu's Rageblade.
It's not just the threat of the Kog'Maw as well, it's that the complete vision control that TSM Academy has down that bot side and the mid lane being broken, so a Blaze Olive can go down there. OpTic reads that, says, screw it, we're going to give up the bot side of the map and we're going to move on for Baron.
This is so tricky from OpTic, but it is going to be stopped. Brandini going after Palafox, not quite able to find the damage, instead likely going to be shut down himself. Your stopwatch keeping Palafox alive, while bottom side it's Andy who falls to Mr. Rawlez, and TSM Academy trading 1-for-1 so far, getting the Infernal Drake and putting their bottom lane in a position to maybe take that turret out as well. A Blaze Olive finding himself caught between a rock, a hard place, and an Ornn. Not finding a way out just yet, but a nice Sejuani ulti from downtown to keep him going.
A nice pose on Winter as well as he just shot his Q out. Andy not respecting the 1v2 he'd been forced into because unsealed Spellbook Ornn had teleported up to the top side to join in on that Baron attempt. That didn't quite work out. They lose their bot turret. They lose the Infernal Drake. Things are starting to come apart a little bit here for OpTic.
3,000 gold lead for TSM Academy. Kadir jumps in there just trying to say, hey, get the heck out of my jungle, but it's not really going to be that big of a threat considering how strong that Corki is. Level 14 compared to a level 10 Jarvan that only has tank items.
And it was a cute idea out of OpTic thinking that they can go for this Baron, but unfortunately there is that ward in River that had seen them going for that play, so TSM was aware of it. They sent only the necessary resources down to claim that Infernal Dragon, and then Cho'Gath by himself with the Corki is really all they need to kind of chase them off of that Baron buff. You saw them instantly give it up, and then Brandini had ran a little bit too far forward. He got punished, but the rest of TSM was able to get out just fine after stopping that Baron attempt.
All right, so Baron's still on the table. No crazy 20-minute Baron stuff in this game. You do have Infernal going over to TSM Academy. You do have another Infernal that's going to be spawning about 5 minutes from now, and the TSM squad is scaling. You're getting more items on that Kog'Maw. Blade of the Ruined King, the second one completed on him. You mentioned the Hurricane earlier. We're not going to see that quite yet. Kadir forced to EQ his way out of trouble in his jungle. As you can see, TSM Academy, with that package ready to go, they're confident. They're moving into the enemy jungle, placing down those wards, really trying to extend this lead, choke their opponents out of their own territory.
Yeah, as much as I love the Valkyrie or package into 3 enemies, I also have to appreciate the more controlled play with it, where you work in, get some wards down, make sure you're safe to farm out, and keep the package as more of a defensive retreat tool if you try and get caught out in the enemy jungle. Heady play out of TSM to continue trying to build this lead. A lot of wards up in the top side now. Mr. Rawless sitting in the mid lane, so you have both these marksmen up on the top side of the map trying to push these lanes in.
I mean, with something like the package, so much of it is the threat of the package as opposed to actually having it used, right? Just the fact that it's there, it makes your opponents guess a second time, what if we fight this and he has package? It makes you a little bit more scared. Whereas, I mean, if you just use it to fling yourself into people, you can get some major plays done, but at the same time, it could go really bad, and then you don't have to do that.
Yeah, well, no package doesn't mean they can't pick this fight. They're trying to go on to Winter.
Winter finding himself caught out a little bit here, blows the horn, tries to send the ram back at his opponents, gets a little bit of damage, walks away. No harm, no foul. Ults for ults.
Yeah, not much force there. And like you're saying with the package, how great of an offensive and defensive tool it is, it does have a lot of these kind of interactions that it functions a little bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, because it does give you that unstoppable effect when you cast it. So sometimes you see people land their stun on you, but you started channeling the package right as that happens, and you end up shooting halfway across.
The Tristana effect.
Yeah, a bit of that buffered Tristana jump effect. So it can be very frustrating for people to play against when you have it. It gives you that extra bit of defensive capabilities, assuming your mechanics are on point.
The 1 versus 1 between the top laners that are now hanging out in the bottom lane just becomes less and less effective as time goes on. Considering they just want to build those tank items, they just want to become harder to kill, neither one has the ability to significantly impact the other's health at all. So that's just going to turn into the most farmy of farm lanes. Brandini doesn't care. He's just going to go ahead, put his Cho'Gath spikes into those minion waves. Easy peasy, 1, 2, 3, easy, farm them all up. Dokla just has to sit there and wait until the minion wave shows up for him to smack. I mean, hitting the Cho'Gath, it'll do a little bit.
Well, I love to watch.
It's not going to do a lot.
Keep me here the rest of the game, please, spectators.
The ultimate wet noodle fight. Oh, wait, hold on. Nope, never mind.
Oh, what are we doing? Right. I mean, it's at the point where the Trundle has this opportunity to build the lead on the Cho'Gath, but he got ganked twice, died, turret went down on the top side early on. Brandini just hit his item spikes way too early for Dokla to actually amass an advantage where you can threaten the Cho'Gath. And now, with that Warmog's completed as well, if you ever do win a trade against the Cho'Gath, well, that damage isn't going to stick, as well as the innate sustain built into his passive. So at this point, yeah, like you said, maybe Dokla can keep him pushed in, but there's no way he's actually going to threaten a kill down onto this Cho'Gath.
Now, speaking of Warmogs, you've also got one done for Kadir's Jarvan. And normally, you know, Cinderhulk, Warmogs, you're like, man, that's an impressive health pool. That's shiny, that looks good, that health bar looking beefy. But you're up against a Kog'Maw with Blade of the Ruined King and Ginsu's. He is going to melt like butter. Overused analogy, I know, probably could have thought of something less cliche, but it's so true, because that Kog'Maw will just destroy him. Kadir has got to be so careful jumping in like that.
We talked about how the Hurricane's often the second item that you see, but there's 3 tanks on the side of OpTic Academy, so I think a pretty smart adaptation in the build for the Kog'Maw here. Realize that you can shred through them pretty easily. He does have the adaptive helm, so it will cut into that W damage a little bit that comes in for Kog'Maw, but for the most part, he's still going to be chewing through those tanks. They pick a fight here.
Sejuani ulti dropped. They're going to burst Winter down before he can do anything. Doesn't even get off the first part of the Ornn ultimate. Andy having to use the Arcane Shift, getting himself back. Silence comes through. Ignite still taking. Shady grabbing the kill onto that one. 2 for 0. TSM Academy backing themselves away. Silence does find its way onto Brandini, but considering he's anything but dead, he'll shortly be full HP thanks to Warmogs.
Yeah, that brush bait did not work at all for OpTic. After they realized that TSM wasn't going to fall for it, they tried to wrap back in the mid lane, but took a pretty greedy path in doing so, which allowed them to open up onto Winter. 2 go down. No Baron taken, though. It looks like they're going to go a little bit slower and focus on this Infernal.
Yep, second Infernal just means, hey, let's go for that. Let's take the sure thing, get more damage going. And again, on a squad that's got something like a Corki with a Kog'Maw, double Infernal is scary. Dokla Now finding himself in a 1 versus 1. That's actually a 1 versus 3. That is, that's not the place you want to be. 4-1 and 2 on that Cog now.
He was losing that 1v1 before his backup showed up. And that's what you're talking about with this Kog'Maw being able to chew through these tanks. Even with that adaptive helm, it was not even close to an even fight.
And I mean, the Blade of the Ruined King, the lifesteal makes it so we can fight the tank 1 versus 1 as well. I mean, lifesteal's a very powerful dueling stat. So when your Trundle can't just stand there and bonk the Kog'Maw in melee range, you got problems.
Nope, and here's that greedy path we were talking about. All of them are kind of hugging that choke as they go through. They get bursted out by the Kog'Maw and the Corki AoE, and then Winter's just on the tail end of his group. They just pull the trigger to go onto him, and they chase him all the way up the mid lane. A little bit of a flash forward aggressively under turret here. No minion wave right now, so they couldn't use it to push. I'm surprised to see that they didn't try to force the Baron a little bit more. Brandini was low, but he has a Warmog, so as long as he's avoided taking enemy damage for a little bit, he should regen up relatively quickly. Kadir was there with Smite, but he just got forced out of the fight, has his own Warmogs, but hey, you got a Cho'Gath. I think the ultimate was still up, so might have been able to use it there. Either way, they're so far ahead, they're fine resetting and forcing it down now.
This is a very, very dark-looking map once again. No vision around that entire Baron area for OpTic Academy. True-Shot Barrage gets shot out just to sort of show, hey, this is happening. Do we want to stop this? The answer, it seems, is going to be no. Kadir not going in for the 0 or hero steal, realizing you're up against the Cho'Gath. The answer is most likely going to be 0. Can't really afford that kind of a risk at this point.
No. Had no way to get involved. Sejuani was on zoning duty because they got the backup Smite in the Cho'Gath, and they can two-man that Baron just 28 minutes into the game. Corki does a lot of damage. Kog'Maw didn't even need to show up, just stayed in the mid lane, keep pressuring. Really nice Baron take by TSM Academy. All the outers are already down. They should be able to force really aggressively around these inners now, as they have a huge front line.
They got a huge front line. Their carries are in a spot where they're able to output a ton of damage. You've got your Infinity Edge, plus your Zeal, plus your Sorcerer Shoes and Trinity Force on the Corki. Both carries also with QSS, so you're not going to get stuck by that Malzahar if somebody walks into an unfortunate position just a little bit further ahead of where they should. And you've got 3 minutes left on Baron, Mark. This should be the point of the game where TSM Academy locks it down.
And it's one of those things where everyone talks about how annoying it is to play against Malzahar because you got to sink that extra gold into a defensive item early on. But if you're ahead a couple thousand gold, you don't mind dropping some of that into a I'll never die button.
Yeah, sure. All right, I'll give you 1,300 gold. Your champion doesn't do anything anymore. See ya.
Yeah,
go clear some waves. Spawn
absolutely.
Space crabs.
A great trade-off when you're ahead. Very annoying when you're behind or even, but from this position, TSM's carries at this point are very hard to get onto.
And their meatballs in the front line are becoming impossibly hard to deal with. You can see 4,000 health on that Cho'Gath now, working towards the Abyssal Mask that you mentioned earlier. Cho'Gaths often like to build. That's also going to help magnify the damage from both of his carries.
Absolutely. This is a bit of a magic damage heavy team comp on the side of TSM Academy. Obviously, with both marksmen really actually having almost a majority of their damage come out across Corki by a large portion. Kog'Maw a lot closer to the 50-50 split. So it can be a little scary when you have such a damage spread, but they're strong enough at this point in the game. They really don't need to worry about that fact. And like you said, that Abyssal Mask will help them stay ahead.
Brandini stays close enough to the turret to take it down. The rest of his team will do the same thing here in the mid lane. And that's it. All 6 turrets down outside of the base of OpTic. That means TSM now has to mount the assault on the inhibitor turrets themselves. We see a lot of teams mess up at this point in time, but if you can clear this last hurdle, closing out the game is generally not that difficult from that point. Brandini, the target, multiple OpTic members closing in here. They should be able to take him down before we can do much about it. And TSM will trade the top lane inhibitor turret for that top laner. Now can they get the inhibitor with it before OpTic can respond? Looks pretty easy to me as the horn is sounded, but a very nice shield coming out from Shady to make sure the knock-up part can't come through.
Nice play out of TSM Academy. Got punished as OpTic found their shot, pulled the trigger, and took down Brandini, but the rest of the team intelligently rotated onto the far side of the map, pushed down that top turret, take it for free. And there you see why Braum is such an annoying champion for Ornn to play into. Last game, we saw the Tahm Kench with the Malzahar picked into it. This time, the Braum was already taken when they selected Ornn, opting into a bit of an annoying champion to try and play into.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how in the laning phase you said the Ornn beats melee matchups. You can actually harass them a lot, beat them in lane, bully them a bit. But when you look at post-laning phase, when you look at the fact that he presses R and then you press not even an ultimate, just nullify it, feels bad, man.
Yeah, feels pretty bad. And as well as the fact that those early game advantages we talked about don't factor in quite as much when you're in a dual laning phase against marksman. So can't abuse the Braum that he would be able to do in an actual 1v1.
I do like the atomization from the OpTic carries. I like the fact that you're looking at a Leandries. I like the fact that you're looking at Blade of the Ruin King. Lord Dominic's regards on there as well to deal with the giant health pools on these double Warmogs frontliners for TSM Academy. But OpTic have their work cut out for them. They're constrained into their base. They've already lost one inhibitor. They're down 3 Drakes to nothing. They're down 11,000, or 9,000, excuse me, gold. This team has got to find some kind of a big play.
Absolutely, and you see that they do have the damage to take down the tanks at TSM Academy as Brandini dropped down that bot lane when they were able to focus him down. But that was with no carries around. The problem is when both stack up. TSM's Academy carries are going to do a lot more in that situation, so OpTic need to find ways to kind of isolate those meatballs and take them down.
Well, it's actually the OpTic meatball taking a little bit of damage here now, as the push from a Blaze Olive comes up in the bottom lane. The rest of TSM Academy hanging out there mid, doing the 4-1 split. They don't have the Baron buff anymore, but they don't feel like they need it. Because they have that inhibitor down in top lane, they know they have some free pressure there. They're just going to continue this constant forcing of the issue onto OpTic. And I mean, if you're OpTic, what do you do other than just defend under your turrets and hope they mess up?
I mean, I liked what they did in the previous attempt where they do get a kill onto Brandini, cost them their top inhibitor, so you can't do that trade too much more, but if the enemy team is not going to step out of position, if a Blaze Olive isn't going to end up too far forward and you can jump on him, it is really, really hard to play out from here because your engage is kind of limited to the Ornn and the Jarvan. So Ornn gets blocked out by Braum, J4 jumps in alone. Where's the follow-up, really?
Right. How do you actually turn, okay, we found an engage, into, okay, we found a fight and won it? Very difficult transition to make as the mid lane inhibitor turret falls. TSM Academy looking for inhibitor number 2 to go with it. Two-shot barrage comes out. Normally you see Brahms like to block those, but Shady knows that he needs to save that strictly for the Ornn ultimate. And so they'll just rotate down to the bottom side.
Huge range advantage on TSM's side. I mean, Ezreal obviously very annoying when pelting with Mystic shots, but his auto attack range isn't huge. Corki's R is equally as spammable. Nope, they found Kog'Maw.
All right, there we go. Ornn ulti going to be canceled once again. Shady doing his job on that one. OpTic Academy trying to force this fight, but it's going to be the locket used to keep them alive. They've already lost Winter. TSM Academy going after them on this one. Brandini going to be taken very low. Andy almost able to find the kill onto him, but just barely misses out. A Blaze Olive now going in, able to find himself a triple kill for that 80 carry. Mr. Rawless getting 3 means that Dokla grabs the kill onto a Blaze Olive, but now, considering it's a 1-for-3 overall, considering you've only got your Mouse and your Trundle left alive, TSM Academy may just look to end.
Yeah, they got super creeps in the top lane that they can meet up with. It's only Palafox really bringing any damage to try and dissuade this. And Mr. Rawless is going to chew right through Dokla, aided with another chomp down from the Cho'Gath, and that looks like that's going to be game.
I don't think Palafox has a whole lot left in the arsenal left to spend. Greg jumping in, zoning him away. The Nexus falls under siege. Ulti comes out. The damage isn't there. That's going to be GG. No 0-win teams still left in the Academy League now. TSM Academy finally puts themselves on the board.
So if you are, paying attention, last week they mirrored very, very closely what happened between Academy and the main teams. So this week, TSM fans, main roster going to get a win for sure.
Yeah, there could be some hope there, TSM fans. Never give up on the hope in that one. But for TSM Academy, you are feeling good about this. Just like I said at the end of Game 1, if you're CLG Academy, going into Week 3, 0-4 would feel really bad. If you're TSM Academy, it would feel just as awful. And now this team has something to say, hey, look, here's our foundation, here's our success, let's build.
And it was really how they did it that was very impressive. You had, like we said, a laning phase that was mostly focused on surviving, but they still found opportunities to get ganks off. They punished the Trundle for wanting to build his own advantages, able to get some kills up there. And then Corki and Kog'Maw start hitting the power spikes and completely take over the game. Great play out of Mr. Rawless in particular.
And we saw some good plays out of OpTic Academy as well. I don't just want to turn this into TSM Academy was able to run away with it, because OpTic made some good moves early, and we even saw down bottom lane the play that happened, the rotations, the infamous Krug death. And we actually have a replay of that to show what happened, what went wrong. So let's take a look at how that ended here. You can see Kadir running away.
Yeah, so the Kog'Maw runs over, chunks him out, and then it's his Cinder Hulk passive is still running, and they just mess him up. That was a lot of damage from those Krugs.
That was actually quite a lot of damage, but Kadir does drop there, so that ends up being his first death of the game. But overall, OpTic Academy, this was their first game, like we said, with Winter, with Kadir, with the intended 5-man roster of this squad.
And given that they did start a little bit on the back foot, given they didn't play together last week, I think they look decent. Kadir had some nice ganks, well understood what he was trying to do in generating an advantage in the mid lane. Just kind of got over-eager, thinking he could get that first blood, lost his flash for it, kind of limited his playmaking after that, and they never found an opportunity to get back onto a Blaze Olive before his flash came back up. So pretty unfortunate on that part.
And then we saw, although there was a valiant effort, a good defense coming out from OpTic Academy for the longest amount of time, we've got one more replay that we're going to take a look at, which is TSM Academy finishing off this game in the final fight.
And I love this. Mr. Rawls gets jumped on, kites out, gets locked in the Jarvanol, and is like, you know what? I'm just going to stop moving, keep auto-attacking. Just sits there, auto. No real threat on him. He's able to, just shoot out a ton of damage onto the front line before needing to kite forward. The fight's taking place on the right side as well. Brandini flashes out with almost no HP. A Blaze Olive getting aggressive, finishing off Andy with the help of the Kog'Maw from Mr. Rawls there. Good combination between both of them. Does go down to Doklu, who has to flash the wall over. But at that point, a 3-for-1 is a game-ending fight.
Yeah, when it's 3-for-1, when you've still got both the carries alive, I mean, well, you still got one carry alive, but he's got the strength of plenty of carries.
Yeah, Kog'Maw's big.
Yeah, it was quite a scary prospect to be going up against for OpTic Academy. But now we've actually got Brandini here from TSM Academy via Skype, so he's going to be joining us, and we'd like to welcome him to the broadcast as we do a little bit of a post-game interview. Brandini, how are you feeling?
Feeling good about the win.
I would expect so. Getting the first win, the team getting themselves on the board here in week number 2. What was the strategy going into that game specifically?
The game was kind of just to hold off, wait for Kog'Maw and Corki to scale, and then we can just contest any objective we want because we just naturally outscale them.
There were a lot of ganks that were thrown up to the top side. You guys were able to kill the Trundle twice. Was this something where he was mispositioning somehow and you knew you could punish it, or was it just a good timing by you guys to find him and pick him off so the Trundle couldn't build a lead?
Trundle has to play aggressive in that matchup, and if he has to play aggressive, his wave will naturally push. So it's really easy to just abuse him and get free kills.
So coming into this game, obviously TSM Academy, the games hadn't gone the way you wanted so far. This time you guys do walk away with the win. It's the enemy nexus that explodes. What do you think was the biggest difference between the way you approached this game and the way that you had approached the previous 3?
The other 3 games, we kind of just played reactively instead of sticking to the plan that we would originally have before the game. But this one, everything was really clear. We could control our lead, keep up tempo, and play for objectives and win the game.
So kind of my final question is, now that you have your first victory, you guys going to go out and celebrate because you guys were talking about crushing people. You finally beat your first opponent. Is this something that we're going to be like, woohoo, let's get food? Or is it like a finally we got the win, let's buckle back down and keep practicing?
We're pretty happy about the win, but we're just going to keep, we're just going to keep steady, try to smash every other competition for now, and see what happens soon.
All right, we'll see
we'll
what
try
happens.
To keep this lead.
Nice.
We'll see what happens indeed. Thank you very much for joining us, Brandini. Congratulations again on the win, and hopefully we'll get to see you guys doing some more cool stuff on the Rift here very soon.
All right. Thanks.
So, Brandini, obviously they came into this game with a plan. They wanted to play more proactively. They didn't want to just sit back and be like, oh, they're doing this. Well, we'll do this. It's like, no, we're doing this. This is how the game's going to go.
Which is important to note because even, like you said, their team comp mostly wants to sit back and just make it to the mid to late game. It's important to not do nothing. There's a difference between wanting to hit that point and being able to punish mistakes like a Trundle needing to push to get his advantage. So just because you don't want to lose the Trundle doesn't mean you can't punish him when he gets too aggressive.
All right, well, we're going to go on another break right now with 2 games down, but we're just getting started. Up next, we're going to see who holds the top spot in Academy with Cloud9 going up against Echo Fox for that top spot. Don't go anywhere.